Yes, God is with us even in the darkest of night. He helps us through those difficult times. And really, that's what we're going to talk about today. I was all set to talk about bread, but it seems like we've been dwelling on bread quite a bit. So I'm going to try to move away a little bit from bread. There's nothing wrong with the bread of life that Jesus is. But we're going to look at the Old Testament, which, by the way, involves bread. Blessings in discouragement. We have a gentleman here, Elijah, who was most certainly discouraged. You know, at first, we see that he is completely, elated he had to be. You can't imagine, I can't, to watch as all of this takes place before his eyes, just before our reading in 1 Kings. Elijah thought the people of Israel finally had gotten it. My goodness, how could they not? Here you had God coming forth and striking this altar that had a bull and wood and water covering everything, even a trough dug around it, and the stone of the altar even wiped out by this incredible fire that he produced, and the calling of the prophet Elijah. Wow, it must have been amazing. And to see that before your eyes, I just can't imagine. I think that we have a situation here where, the people, even the people said, the Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God. That's Yahweh. He is God. They realize, finally, that the one true God is Yahweh, not what these 450 Baal priests were talking about. This God couldn't come forth in any way, shape, or form. I think Elijah must have thought he was in the restroom or something. Here he could not come forth and answer the call of his priests because, he wasn't God at all. He was stone. He was nothing. The one true God had shown himself in a mighty way before the people. And here Elijah had called upon him to do so. He had been preaching and teaching all along this God, and now how could they miss it? And so what does he do in the face of all of that? Then he was afraid, and he arose and ran for his life. What has happened here? Why would it be that the prophet of God, Elijah, who had seen even more before that, all of a sudden is fearing for his life as he has been serving his God all this time? What in the world is wrong with him? Yes, he feared Jezebel, the queen next to Ahab, the king, who had said, let's get rid of this guy. He's trouble. We will kill him. It's an interesting thing that she sends a messenger to him, not a person to take his life, but a messenger to tell him, maybe tomorrow we're going to do this. Ahab, I think, something had happened to him, so he was afraid. We heard that. Ahab was too. So something had taken place in his faith life even maybe. But we know for sure that Jezebel was unchanged in her opinion. She had been a Baal worshiper all of her life. She had a family of Baal worshipers, and she was just going to get rid of this guy who spoke of this other God, Yahweh. And so he ran. He ran for his life. He thought, I guess nothing has changed. I am going to have to run because I'm afraid to die. Interestingly enough, a little later, he does ask to be killed by God. But I kind of look at this and I see something in myself. Maybe you do. Elijah, of course, is a human being. And sometimes we think, it's all or nothing. If it doesn't go right, then, forget it. We do this, and I do it in funny ways, like when we're going on vacation, if things don't go right on the flight and something the vacation is ruined, my wife was here last night back in the back smiling because she said that is truth there, yeah. And maybe you have that kind of a feeling like, look, if all is not right, then it's ruined, it's all wrong. And for Elijah, here you had something amazing that takes place. And the people obviously were affected by this. But he kind of got affected by Jezebel's being after him and going to kill him. And you hear these words that just tell us that he has lost all hope. He is completely and utterly discouraged. It's not going to go right. Nothing's going to go right. I might as well end it all. It's over, you know? And it's so sad that that's what he does. I think that sometimes we feel that way too. So let me tell you about a couple of women. Now they're common folk. They're ordinary women. Maria Elizabeth Lemmerhurt and Margaret Lindemann. Heard of them? Maybe not. These two women were ordinary women, like I say. They went about their lives raising their children and working hard in the home, thinking, well, you know, I don't think anything wonderful and great is going to happen as a result of what I did in my life. I didn't do anything spectacular, like write a wonderful novel read by millions or any of that kind of a thing. But you know, I think we all kind of think that sometimes. We think nothing really grandiose is going to happen as a result of me being on this earth. We think, yeah, I guess I'm just going to live out my life. I'm not going to write any major hymns or anything like that. Her husband, Marie's husband was a musician, and so was her father. And, you know, it's interesting. When we think of these two women, well, we don't know their names, maybe most of us. Bob might, because guess what? We wouldn't be here if it weren't for one of these women. One of them was the mother of Martin Luther. Yeah. Margaret Lindemann was the mother of Martin Luther. And Maria Elizabeth Lemmerhurt was the mother of Johann Sebastian Bach. Yeah. Pretty major people in the world of church and music, I would say. I mean, most people know of Martin Luther. Even it was funny, I Googled Martin Luther, and you don't even put Junior in there, and all you get is Martin Luther King Jr. I did not put King on there. I didn't put Junior in there. But that's a side note. The point is, Martin Luther here was one of the fifth most impactful people that ever walked this earth. Here this woman thought that nothing major would happen in her life. She actually was kind of worried about her young son. In fact, quite a ways through his life, she was worried if he'd even get through the seminary. But yes, he did, and boy, oh boy, did he, right? And of course, Johann Sebastian Bach, you know, he did a few good things, right? He wrote some good music. Bob would agree, I'm pretty sure, and we would agree too. Wow. What an incredible person who put together these hymns that proclaim Jesus Christ in such a beautiful way. And they call him the fifth evangelist. The way that he impacted this world is, well, music. It's amazing how it impacts this world. And so both of these women who would have said, yeah, I don't know, my hard work, my sacrifice probably didn't come to anything great. But see, we don't know. We don't know what God is doing in our lives. We don't know when we lift up a prayer to God and ask for something that what he's going to do. We have no idea what he has planned for us, for our children, for this world. We sometimes question what God's doing. And so Elijah, he thought, well, I'm a failure. I didn't do it right. I don't know what happened there, but it didn't work out. It's all over. I mean, he says this, and he asked that he might die, saying, it is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my fathers. Wow, that's a pretty bad place to be. That is a fully depressed place. Discouraged might he not capture it. He was asking God to take his life. He had it. He had enough. It's over. I just want to end my life. I'm not doing anything more than my fathers had done. Even a man who had seen such amazing, miraculous things happen, including what we just spoke of. Here he was saying, yeah, that's it. I'm done. It's over. Have you ever been there? Have you ever been in a place where you just had an expectation that at least this time something great is going to come about from what I have done here? It's that actual thought of what I have done that probably is part of the problem. Sometimes we think in terms of expectation and what I'm doing. I have done this, Lord, and so therefore you should do this, right? Don't we have those kinds of expectations? I know I do. In my life, I have had great expectations for many things that, well, didn't turn out quite the way I had hoped. I think in terms of some of my relationships, you do this and they think that okay, I'm going to just say, my wife will pat me on the back and say, a great job there, and she's, no, not really, not in that case. In fact, you kind of missed that over there. That happens, right? And it happens in bigger ways. I think of when in my life I thought, oh boy, God is working through me mightily. We were in the church in Bakersfield, and my goodness, it doubled in size, and it kept growing, and all these wonderful things were happening. And I thought, wow, okay, God, thank you so much for this great thing. Now, I get called up to Healdsburg, my previous church, and well, nothing like that happened. It didn't double in size. It hardly was growing. And what's going on, Lord? I'm doing the same things here. Why isn't it the same thing as the results? We don't know what God's going to do. We cannot allow ourselves to be consumed with our own expectations of what He's going to do in our lives, what we're going to see happen as a result of what we tried to do. Sometimes we try this way and it doesn't work. We try another way, and sometimes we get out of even God's commands to do the way we should do things. And so for us, it is a focus on His will being done in our lives, right? You've heard that before. Yeah, that's something we ought to ask for. God, your will be done, not mine. That's what He wants. He doesn't necessarily look for success in our lives. He looks for faith in our lives. He looks for us to trust in Him, to be good with whatever it is that He is doing in our lives, and look for the blessings. Be grateful. Be grateful for what He has in fact done in our lives. If you think of this in this way, you know that the Lord has a better answer in times of discouragement for us. In Elijah's case, we see that. Most certainly he had a better answer. Now, Elijah was afraid, no question. In fact, this guy was so afraid. He ran from one country to another. He was in Jezreel in the northern kingdom. He ran all the way to Jordan in the southern kingdom. And there he was in Beersheba. And then it says in our scripture that he walked a day's journey into the wilderness. He left that country too. He was afraid. He was so afraid that he walked himself to the point of not being able to survive. He laid himself down under a tree and prayed the prayer that we just heard. He wanted God just to end it. But what does God do at that point in time? He feeds Elijah. When we're discouraged, God will raise us up. That's what the angel told him when he came to him at this point in his life. And he woke him up and he says to him, "Arise and eat." This angel of the Lord came into his life at a time in which he was so sadly discouraged. Maybe you're in that place. God came alongside, brought him food, bread. He baked him a cake. How about that? He gave him water. He helped him to get sustenance, right? Physical sustenance. And he brought him to a place where he could sleep again, and then woke him again and gave him another meal because he needed that meal for his future travel. He would be going to Mount Horeb to meet with God in person. And he knew that he needed these meals to be able to give him enough strength to do what he had in mind for him. I mean, Elijah didn't know what he had in mind for him. He just was being discouraged, but then he got food in his stomach and in water, and he was able to continue on in life. God does that for us. I think you all have a time in your life when God gave you enough to continue, to keep going. It's not always in the way we think, but we know that God hears our prayers. He most certainly answers our prayers, not maybe in the same way that we was hoping. Maybe it wasn't in the way that we expected. We had expectations he'd do it this way. But he does it in some other way. And sometimes it's amazing and a miracle. Maybe you've experienced that, where he does something so amazing you had no idea, you didn't even think that could happen. Maybe you've been in a group of people that have prayed for something for somebody, and wow, you couldn't believe what happened there. And everybody in that group sees that that prayer was not only answered in a different way, but it was in a mighty way that was incredible. That's what we see God doing. Our desires don't come to fruition, but something else happens that may in fact be even more amazing. God gave his prophet the strength to go on. And we want to remember how he does that for us. His people, in groups, the Israelites, he fed them manna in the desert, right? So that they could continue on. They couldn't. They were starving. They needed food. They needed water, and a rock is tapped and water rushes forth. This is the kind of God that we have. So how about us? How does he do that for us? Does he do that for us? I think so. I think in many ways God blesses us and we don't even see it. He keeps us going and he helps us to continue on. He gives us sustenance. He refreshes us with the water of life, right? That's what he talks about. You think in talking about people in the desert, we remember that water is a good thing in the desert. But there's something else he gives us that is complete and utter sustenance. Jesus invites us to cast our cares upon him. When we are struggling, when we see everything's gone wrong, nothing could go right. I'm sure this is the end. I've had it up to here. I've had enough. That's when we take those cares, those troubles, and we lay them at his feet. Maybe you come to this altar. I come here on days that church isn't even in session, and I kneel here and say, Lord, take this from me. I can't handle it. Please. Those are the times we lay our troubles at his feet. And guess what he gives us in return? It is Jesus who saves us completely. And he does it through his sacraments. He brings us to this rail, as he will in a few moments. He allows us to partake in his body and his blood. He went to that cross and died a horrific death so that you might have life, so that you might have life abundant, so that you would have life eternal, because he did what he did for us. He laid down his life so that we would be able to partake in a meal that would give us so much. With his own body and blood in the bread and the wine of his supper, the food of healing and life that refreshes and sustains us. Amen.